everyone for attending Shipping Climate Addressing the Triple Planetary Crisis. We are so appreciative that you could all be here. This is a very important issue for Foundation Cota Solaris, Mary Foundation, and Velux Foundation. We have worked on it for a couple of years now. We saw that the development within the International Maritime Organization had a lot of remit and had a lot of focus on reduction of the CO2 emission. However, we thought as Foundation that there is more pressures on the oceans that need to be addressed, and shipping is one of them, of course related to CO2, but also related to the other biodiversity impacts which is occurring from shipping as one of the activities. There's many others, and this is just not to out any industry. We are working on a lot of other issues as well, but this we thought was timely with the fact that the International Maritime Organization in 2023 adopted a greenhouse gas strategy, and we actually think that what is one of our aim as foundations working together from Denmark and from Chile, the North-South Cooperation, that it's important to establish synergies between conventions and synergies between initiatives. And we saw that the strategy, the greenhouse gas strategy from the IMO would be a unique opportunity actually to include also biodiversity concern and pollution concern for that matter. So our adventure started a few years ago, and last year we hosted a workshop in Monaco during the Monaco Ocean Week. We also had a workshop in Malmö with the World Maritime University, so we're sort of bringing it all together and working across sectors and with the different UN entities. But before I give the word to Natalie Hilmy from the Center for Scientifica de Monaco to give a short summary, I want to give the word to Richard Garrett, which is the president of the Explorer Club and has explored space and ocean. So you have everything in perspective. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody here to the Explorers Club. And for those of you who aren't as familiar with it as those of you who come here regularly, the Explorers Club is about 122 years old now, and has what I like to describe as sort of 3 eras of exploration. That we're now in this a third era. In the earliest days of the club, there were still unexplored parts of the world. So those earliest explorers were taking a lot of personal life risk in order to discover the boundaries of the geography of the world. The poles hadn't been reached, the top of Everest, the bottom of the ocean, and a lot of the things we celebrate downstairs in our lobby. But for about the next 50 years, the Explorers Club is really about 85% of our members are scientific field researchers. So people bringing back scientific data to share with the world. And the other 15% are filmmakers and poets and artists who help those scientists communicate that in a way that is hopefully moving to the general public to take an interest in things like climate. But interestingly, I think we're now in sort of a third era that started maybe 10 or 20 years ago, where climate issues are now so politically charged that a lot of people and politicians in countries around the world have sort of dug their heels in and sort of made up their mind as to whether this is something that they need to pay attention to or for some reason have elected not to. I think there's other priorities that are more important. And so now, at events like this, here at Climate Week, what I'm always excited about, and I'm excited to hear from our amazing panelists, is that people now are here not just to ring a bell and express the problems that are there, but also to very specifically describe solutions. And often, a lot of our explorers are out there building the solutions and trying to scale those solutions, and they come back from the field, frankly, trying to raise money to help literally go out, let's just go fix it. And this attitude of, yes, the world is an incredible number of crises, but we are the ones that have to fix it. And so let's figure out how to do that and go do it, I think is critical. I know your panelists here are experts in the area of shipping. And obviously, with the globalization that we've now seen around our planet, shipping is not going to go away. It's still going to be the dominant form of trade that If anything, will continue to grow. Humanity's needs will grow in that area. And so it's something we really have to get right. And so I look forward to the discussions and debates, and I hope you all come out with fantastic solutions in addition to articulating well the problem with accuracy so it can be solved. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. I think this was an excellent introduction. As Denmark just had an astronaut in space, one of his findings of what was really breathtaking, he said, and I think that is really reflecting of the panel we have here, so many people from around the world, is that he said, well, there is no borders. We all have responsibility for the oceans, the earth, because we all need to cooperate. Because it's not like nature or ocean knows that there is a border where they have to stop or anything like that. So I think that's really timely for Natalie to give a presentation on the outcomes of our Monaco workshop. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, Patricia, for inviting me. In Monaco, we have the Monaco Ocean Week every March. And with Foundation Mary, we decided to have this Blue Economy Roundtable. The first one was about fisheries. And the second one, we had the Foundation of Charlotte Vevelux, who came to join us to talk about shipping. And we will see all the economic sectors related to the ocean every year. So what we have done is to put together natural scientists, economists, and policymakers to have science-based solutions. And this was very important because we don't want solutions like, we don't know if they work or not. We really wanted them to be science-based. And this is what we tried to do. It was a transdisciplinary workshop. And we had 4 working groups. One was about economy and finance, one about institution and governance, one about science and environment, and the last one about technology. All were talking, of course, about shipping. And I'm going now to give you a quick summary of what has been said on the governance group. And we talked about MPAs. MPAs are very important to protect the ocean, to protect our biodiversity, and nature will help us to protect our planet, sorry. And this was very important, and the boat should slow down on these MPAs, where there are very emblematic species like the whales, for example, to avoid the collision. So this is very important. Another important topic was about renewable energy and hydrogen, for example, to make this sector more sustainable. And it is very important to have one institution taking this together, because for the moment we have several institutions talking about the ocean, talking about shipping, and we don't have one view, one leader on this topic. So maybe this would be important to have. And then I would like also to insist on something. Developing countries have specific views, and it is important to include developing countries' viewpoints and not only developed countries. They should work together, and the financial flows should go to mitigation and adaptation. Those are the most important things that we discussed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Yes, I think, we did talk about MPAs, how important it is, and also implementing the 30 by 30 from the global biodiversity targets. It was also a discussion that we brought forward in Malmö, where we also talked about how to use particularly sensitive sea areas, PSSA under the IMO, how they could be used as a tool to manage the speed of boats, and also, of course, pollution discharges from ships. With that, I want to say thank you to Natalie, and I also want to welcome our panel. Today, we have a very interesting panel that goes broadly across sectors. We have Juan Carlos Gomez, who is a special envoy for climate from Panama. And as you told me, not only climate, you go broad, yeah. You also have biodiversity and pollution with you, yeah. And then we have Dr. Manuel Vidar, which is chair of IUCN's Climate Crisis Committee, which is very interesting as well. And then we have Anna Maria Laura, which is from the Ocean Conservancy. And also we have, of course, our co-host, Francesca Cordisolari, which is the executive president of Philanthropy Cordisolari. We have Abdella Moxid, which is secretary of IPCC. So we have a UNEP leg here as well. And then we also have Mrs. Christus, which is former Ministry of Environment from Portugal, and now a law professor, which is very interesting. And then we have Tristan Torrell, and Tristan is from the CBD. Yeah. Welcome, and we so appreciate for you being here. So I want to start with Juan Carlos Gomez. I mean, your work in Panama on, we had an event on Saturday where the Minister of Panama, the Environmental Minister of Panama, was very forceful on, we had to act now on environment, we had to act now on marine issues. So what is your priorities on shipping? I mean, you're a great shipping nation, Panama is, so do you have any priorities that you would like to bring forward, both within the CBD upcoming or with the IMO? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation to all of you involved, and thank you for taking time, especially when there are so many other events. And if you're here, that means that you really care about the oceans and the green way towards a new maritime sector. So I'm going to be blunt. We have a window of opportunity of barely 6 months to build a global regulatory framework to transition shipping towards green shipping. And this will make the shipping industry the first hard-to-abate sector to decarbonize on time and in alignment with the Paris Agreement. But this will only happen if we make the tough decisions, well, not really tough, the right decisions that we need to take by the time that we finish with the first committee of the environmental division of the IMO happening in about 1 week. Once again, we only have 6 months left to build the regulatory framework to make shipping the first hard-to-abate sector to decarbonize in line with the Paris Agreement. That is huge. That is a very important thing, and we must accomplish it. Panama is sending its delegate to this meeting happening at the IMO to send a strong signal. Shipping must decarbonize, and we must use market instruments to decarbonize this sector. And for us, the protection of the oceans, it's very important. We have more than 50% of our maritime areas under some level of protection, achieving the 30 by 30 goal 9 years in advance. We're also a carbon negative nation, which means that we clean up the mess for others, and we are going to continue to do it as is part of the vision of Minister Navarro for Panama to continue strengthening the power of its forests to clean up the atmosphere. And on top of that, we have the Panama Canal, which is the green route of the world that allows global shipping to be a bit less polluting than what it would have been without the Panama Canal. So Panama is doing its part, and we're going to be demanding other countries to also do their part. But we don't stop there. We're trying to streamline environmental action. For example, it is absurd that we're talking about climate, biodiversity, desertification, and oceans in separate rooms. It makes no sense. Why are we trying to split nature when nature is just one thing highly complicated? So in order to walk towards a better future, we're going to start presenting our nature commitments in just one document to all Rio conventions. But we're also going to be demanding more change because the system needs to be shaken up if we really want to achieve the goals that we're setting ourselves to achieve to protect humanity on this planet. So the future of shipping is green, and as you know, the global maritime powerhouse, we're going to be there to lead this future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gomez. I think that we think you're a champion here because that is what we are trying to achieve, that the different conventions establish a synergy between them, that we don't talk about the issues in isolation. It's difficult, but we fully agree. Let's try to make a change, yeah. And then we got Dr. Manuel Vidal, Polka Vidal, and you are like chair of the IUC and Climate Crisis Committee. How do you see the challenges within marine conservation and oceans within your work?
Thank you so much. And let me add that I used to be Minister of the Environment of Peru, and because of that, President of COP20, when the action agenda started. So 10 years ago, we started with this Lima Paris Action Agenda that then evolved into being the current Marrakesh Partnership. And I am bringing this not to talk about me, for sure, but to talk about on how much we are evolving in organizing sectors with clear targets and with clear actions towards what you have just said, to have the first hard-to-abate green sector, what it is what we all are planning to achieve. So the point is, what are those elements that can make us able to be optimistic that we can do that we can move this sector, the shipping sector, into being a green one? The first one, it is, because this event, it is about how to address the planetary crisis. That means nature, means desertification, means climate, and even means plastics, because we are discussing a plastic treaty, and the SDGs. And parentheses, we have to start to think, what do we think should be the future after 2030 of the SDGs? How do we think we have to address the future of development when it is the end of the current SDGs? Having said that, the point it is, something that we have to celebrate, it is that for sure we have already agreed on the vision. We have that clear vision. So everybody understand and agree that 1.5 is the threshold, that net zero is the climate objective for mitigation, resilience for adaptation. But now, fortunately, a new kit is coming to this party, the nature positive concept, what it is good. But it is not enough to have the concept that can frame the vision. Also, it is important to give it some content to the concept, to understand well what else do we need to have to make this net zero thing feasible, something that it could be achieved in some time. Second, we have a clear time frame. We know and we have agreed that by 2050 we have to be net zero. That's clear, and even resilient to climate change. And fortunately, the discussions around the shipping sector, it's moving towards that. But look, friends, there are some champions, the early birds, as Maersk, that it is defining to be net zero even earlier. And that is so important, because it is showing that it is possible. It is showing that it is possible by championing the agenda to create a good niche for the economy. So we are always thinking that it is the opposite, that we have to wait for the political or economic signal to do something. And what Maersk is doing, that it is exactly the opposite, it is to open a new niche for a new economy around the shipping sector. And I think that that is a good lesson learned, something that we have to learn, that it must be the way to move those things forward. So we have the vision, we have champions, and we have to understand that this is about the economy. So a new climate economy is emerging in the horizon. And that is so important, because I am always saying, if we are not climate responsible, or in this case, even nature responsible, it is not that the Paris Agreement or the GBF will sanction us. There is no any clause to sanction anybody. What it is good, you know that sometimes some friends are saying to me, why Manuel? So how can we have like kind of law, international law, without any ways to sanction anybody? And it is because the mechanism, it has been built based on moving in a gradual basis, step by step, as a way to build a new economy. And that new economy is emerging, and that is for me so important when it is about the shipping sector. But we have to connect dots. We have to see how can we connect our climate efforts, in which probably we have developed more maturity, more than biodiversity for sure, and it is not that I am complaining or criticizing anybody, but that is the reality. How can we continue connecting dots in relation to our climate objective, nature objectives, the certification, and even development? It is, for example, by convening the non-state actors, by having a strong action agenda, something that it is happening in climate, as well in biodiversity, and soon will happen with this coming COP of the desertification treaty, even with the certification, because it is just with the non-state actors working with governments that we will be able to achieve our objective. That is one of those elements. It is to bring those non-state actors. Second, it is by understanding the process. Because we were together in Panama 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we were talking about all of this transition towards sustainable fuels for the shipping sector. And it is so interesting because we are all the time thinking we have to transition away from fossil fuel. That, as you know, that was the decision in the UAE consensus, transitioning away from fossil fuel. Look, friends, what Maersk is doing with the using of methanol, with currently 8 vessels, and have already ordered 20x more vessels, huge vessels, to work with methanol, with a dual fuel, that is a transitioning away. So it is not that we are starting from scratch. We have good models on how can we gradually transitioning away from fossil fuels. So that it is also something to be considered when it is about shipping or green shipping. But also we have to promote synergies, and that is also so important when it is about shipping. And when we think about how can we create shipping, what has just happened in Panama with this huge crisis because of some droughts and lack of rains, it is showing us how to work on adaptation. I was talking with one of the head of the Canal de Panama, and he told me, despite that we reduce frequency and volumes of vessels, we didn't lose money because we worked well on adaptation. And now we know how to address this kind of crisis for the future. And in that way, in that sense, that is connecting the shipping sector with adaptation and the nature source, the ecosystem, the forest, the protection of forests. And now Panama is working in strengthening the governance for protecting biodiversity as a way to avoid to have the same for the future. And that is fantastic. That is something that we have to learn for the future. But also to promote synergistic relations, we do need to work with ports, because ports are what connected the urban areas with the shipping sector, the nature areas with the shipping sector. And also it is related to vulnerability. It is related to floods. It is related to many of the risks that the shipping sector can suffer if we are not able to adapt. So that is also an important element when it is about on how to address the planetary crisis. But also what we do need to have, and let me finish with this, I am taking too much time probably for this question. It is we do need to have some other elements, good standards. Standards are key. I am board member of the Science Based Target Initiative, and it's clear how much SBTI has built legitimacy by defining a clear net zero standard. And even in the shipping sector, there are some companies that are following the SBTI in the 3 scopes, that it is so difficult. Now, the communities working around nature and biodiversity are developing standards based on the mitigation hierarchy around what it is called the SBTN, Science-Based Target Network. No? Because we do need to have standards, and we do need to have a clear system that can improve our performance when it is about net zero and nature positive. And there are many other elements, the use of economic instruments as carbon pricing. So what I'm trying to say, and sorry if I am not organizing well my ideas, it is that we are not starting from scratch. We have many elements that can help us to continue building and greening the sector, the shipping sector. It is possible. There are good lessons that we have already learned, and the idea is to organize all of those elements to move that sector to be more sustainable. It is possible. Let me repeat what you have just said. It's amazing that we are talking about a sector that we used to think it would be impossible to move them toward decarbonization, that it is close to get that, or close to at least define the strategy to secure decarbonization in some time frame. Let's raise that as a good example, not only for the hard-to-abate sectors, even for countries, because for now, we know that unfortunately, for the next cycle of the NDCs, that will finish by June, so the climate plans, the NDCs, that will finish by June of the next year, unfortunately, we won't have the full set of countries putting again an enhanced and a more ambitious NDC. So we do need to learn from this sector and also to bring to our countries more ambitious target, because that is the only way to put things on track. Thank you
so much. Thank you. Unfortunately, we have to say goodbye to Juan Carlos. Yeah. Now you have to leave. You have an important meeting to go to. We just want to appreciate for you to be attending and participating in our event with the perspective of Panama. And you need to get your pen with you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And then I just want to thank you for your input, Dr. Manuel Vidal. Abdallah Moqsid from the IPCC, I just want to give the word to you, because we were talking about climate, but how do you sort of bridge the gap between climate and ocean? Ocean is also a part of your IPCC report. I know you're having an upcoming meeting, IPCC meeting, and then you have a separate one that also actually bridges the gap between ocean and climate. So the floor is yours. Does it work, or do you want this one?
No, it's working. Thank you very much. First of all, I am really, honored to be once again in this panel. I think when I am looking to these faces, I think somewhere, sometime I can say the solution is you, because this mobilization is an excellent demonstration that we are trying to do our best. So, going back to your question, yes, one of discipline, because IPCC is, considering all the disciplines. You have our 3 working groups: science, vulnerability, and mitigation, that we are really, trying to study all the disciplines, sectoral, and not only this, also even social, private, and even banking system. And we did have for shipping and also ocean a special report about climate change and ocean and cryosphere. And I think it was a special report, but I think the conclusion or recommendation are really important. We did have also in our working group 3, the one related to transport, so the chapter 10, which is dealing with transport, including aviation and shipping. And believe me that we have enough information. What I can say, I think, if you visit our website, at least at the end you can say it, we know. I think there is no excuse to say we don't know. We know that there are information, sound scientific information that we know. But something which came from our sixth cycle is three aspects: the warning, the hope, and challenges. The warning is saying that if everything is living in extreme rhythm, accelerated rhythm of extreme events, and also all the impact are really negative if you are not taking action. And the ocean is, having some acidity. The ocean also is, the cryosphere is melting, and the level of ocean is rising. And also, all this biodiversity is under threat. And I think this is the warning. And the warning, there is no doubt that really we should take some action to encounter the problem. But there is hope. The hope is there because there are many activities, many possibilities that can really be used to deform this track. I think I know that many options just for shipping, just for good intelligence, how we can, transform trajectory, how we can include some improvement even in the boats, can bring added value and can improve the capacity of shipping to be less problematic for the life. But there are challenges. Challenges are there. And challenges can be really connected to the mobilization of all segments of the population. Any action should be inclusive, should be diverse, should be sustainable, sustained, and also all these difficulties should be encountered in order to achieve good implementation. Because it is not about science, it is not about intention, it is about action and implementation, and the implementation that should be assessed and also improved and maintained, sustained in the process. And this is why I said solution is you, because let me conclude by bring you in one sort of journey. IPCC has 35 years of history. When we started in 1988 by the World Meteorological Organization and UNEP, the main objective was just to bring the voice of science of climate to policymakers. So scientists to policymakers, sort of collaboration. But that time, 1988, we can say we start to know. We were saying maybe, likely, but report after report, most likely, very likely, virtually certain. And now we are in very virtually certain, situation where the science is there. There is no excuse to take action. When we know, we became responsible. At the same time, believe me, I started IPCC from that time, but we cannot find a room like this where many segments of the population are meeting, discussing, trying to collaborate. And that's in here, the foundation, philanthropy is doing excellent job. Anyone now is speaking about climate change. Anyone want to do something in good sense, good direction. And I think this is why I can say the hope is there. We can implement the hope. And this is something that really very important, but once again, it is not only about hope. It is about pragmatism. We should really think about how we can transform our intention in pragmatic and practical solution to be implemented everywhere, because something success story here, if it is well transformed transported elsewhere, adapted to that context, we can achieve a result. So I think this is the time of, let's say, migration for concept. Let me tell you, initially, everybody was talking about crisis management. We were managing things when they are there. We migrated to management of the risk. We added some time. But it is not enough. Because now the rhythm of acceleration of extreme events is too fast, too important that it is really beating any adaptation process. This is why we need to go to migrate to the concept of knowledge, risk management. We should know. By knowing, I can have a good prospection, good simulation. I can gain 10 years, 20 years, 30 years to take action from now, or to be prepared. To be prepared for two things: to manage, so to have to implement reactive adaptation. I should adapt now. And with this anticipation, we can say we can have planned adaptation. The adaptation that should come in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I think the mobilization is there. I'm repeating, once again, thank you very much. Really, the solution is you. And you can transform the hope in concrete solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Abdallah. I think it's really timely to talk about the IPCC report, because I recall early in my career, many years ago, when I read the first report, and I think that the policy brief has so much improved when you're a policymaker. And I think, to make science and bridging the gap between science and policy, and I appreciate your gratitude towards, the philanthropy that is giving money to science and also giving money to the work of IPCC. Thank you so much. With that, I want to give the word to Anne-Marie Lauer. She's from the Ocean Conservancy, and I want to ask you, what can Ocean Conservancy, as an NGO, do in addressing the maritime sector and sort of bridging the gap and achieving synergies between the conventions when we talk about climate, pollution, and biodiversity? The word is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. And it's really great to be on this panel with past our ocean host, Panama, also with UN Ocean Conference host, Portugal, and the other COP hosts, et cetera. So I'm really honored to be here. Ocean Conservancy is working on three main pillars to protect the ocean: biodiversity, pollution, primarily plastic pollution, and also the climate crisis. So I thought I'd just very quickly give some examples of how NGOs like us can advocate. Our advocacy, just like country positions and all these different fora, needs to be connected. So right now, I'm here with you today because my colleagues who are focused on shipping are actually at the IMO. And what they're advocating for is the greenhouse gas reduction strategy and strong short-term, mid-term, and long-term standards. And one of those things that's on the table right now, for example, is a carbon intensity indicator. This is about energy efficiency in ships. So if we want energy efficiency because we want to reduce greenhouse gases, that is also going to help us reduce underwater noise, which is a huge factor if we want to protect the biodiversity of the ocean. At IMO, there's also, just last year, they updated noise reduction guidelines, for example. Those are voluntary. They were voluntary 10 years ago, and not a lot happened. So they updated them, and now those guidelines are associated with an action plan and this experiential learning phase. They're still not mandatory. So we have these two different opportunities, taking an action plan, a learning phase, and turning those into mandatory noise reduction guidelines, and then also reducing our carbon intensity, energy efficiency on ships, not just through fuels, but through onboard solar, onboard wind, sails, not wind energy. And so those two things in combination will make the ships more clean, will reduce their fuel usage, and will reduce underwater noise. So just there at the IMO in these two policy positions, there can be synergies. But the IMO is also struggling to take action on pollution, and particularly plastic pollution. There's a lot of marine litter that comes from ships and lost cargo, et cetera. And so the IMO has the opportunity there also to act on pollution. Scrubbers is another really good example, a device that well-intended to take air pollution, to minimize air pollution, turned it into water pollution. So I think just in the IMO, in that one framework, we see a lot of opportunities for synergies to protect the whole ocean and address the climate crisis and pollution. But then, we've been talking a lot about cross synergies between fora. So at UNFCCC, IMO is the place where we're talking about shipping carbon emissions. But there is a ton of domestic action that can be included in NDCs and national climate plans that also helps decarbonize shipping. So we have port electrification. If we're not planning for port electrification when we update our NDCs and think about where renewable energy is coming from, then we won't be able to handle the increased demand that's going to come from ships sitting in the harbor. Last year, I think it was LA, they had a wildfire going on, so there was a lot of smoke. They had a heat wave going on, two things that are caused by climate change, and they had to send all of the ships in the harbor out to the ocean because they couldn't meet the demand that those ships needed, and they were contributing to air pollution by sitting in the harbor. So, these are really all coming together, and we have to think about ways that NDCs can also help us with shipping. And then just really quickly on CBD, a quick example, we have national biodiversity and strategic action plans. If we're not planning for resilience, as was mentioned, when we talk about ports and infrastructure, then that infrastructure is going to be affected by sea level rise and by storms, wildfires, and that will change shipping routes. You can have one incident. In the US this year, for example, we had a ship hit a bridge. That diverted a ton of shipping traffic to other ports nearby and can change routes in an instant. If we're not prepared for what those routes should be to avoid marine protected areas and sensitive habitat, then we will just be creating more threats for biodiversity by trying to address our global maritime issues. So just these are some examples of how, as advocates, but also as parties, when we're participating in these conventions, we really need to be thinking about how a position in one place should be synced with and aligned with our positions in other forums. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that sort of aligned with what they said from Panama, that it has to be the same message that you have in all conventions, and I think that's an excellent, quest for you to have that similar wish that we all address the same thing everywhere, and we sort of had consensus and synergies. With that, I want to give the word to Francesca. Francesca, which is the executive president of Corte Solari. It's you now. Yeah. And I just want to say, you play a really important role in the work that we're doing on shipping. You play a really important role in supporting the IPCC, whether it's land protection, ocean protection. The Foundation Corte Solari has a huge impact everywhere, actually, and we are cooperating together. So you also have an impact in Denmark, which is far north from Chile. So I just want to give you the word and say, what do you think that the role of philanthropy should be to develop solutions? The word is yours.
So first of all, thank you, Charlotte and Velux Fonden, for this partnership. Because really it's impossible to do this alone, and so thank you for all the team, to Abdallah too. Truly, if we are here today, it's because those networking and those relationships that we have been developed all over the time. So we need to work between public, private, and civil society. So I do believe that our relationship in those years we have demonstrated that this relationship is absolutely essential. We have 3 territories in Chile, one of them in Patagonia. When we started conservation in Chile, we decided to develop an effective conservation.
Y eso nos llevó a trabajar sobre los objetos de conservación y sobre las amenazas territoriales.
And that means work on the threats on the territory and the species under threat.
Este formato igual lo hicimos en las tres fundaciones. Queríamos estar súper como en regla.
We developed the same methodology in the three territory.
Y esto nos ayudó, por lo menos, en Patagonia, que es donde estamos ubicados actualmente,
And in Patagonia, where we are now,
el principal objeto de conservación de Patagonia, en la zona donde nosotros estamos, era la problemática del tráfico marino y el impacto de las ballenas.
so one of the main species under threat in the Patagonia was and still is the whale, and one of its main threats was the maritime traffic.
Entonces, bueno, era muy simple, teníamos que trabajar con las ballenas.
So it was really easy, and we decided to work with the whales.
Y en esa zona en especial eran las ballenas azules, en peligro de extinción, el animal más grande del mundo.
And in this area, the blue whales were under threat.
La verdad que debo reconocerles que yo no soy científica, por lo tanto tuve que aprender y el primer aprendizaje fue, yo creo que fue bueno que no fuera científica en realidad.
Yeah, actually, I'm not a scientist, and the first knowledge, well, it was a good thing not to be a scientist, maybe.
Porque, claro, la ciencia se estaba haciendo, pero yo entendí de que era importante mover la ciencia y ponerla en la comunidad.
Because there were a lot of scientists studies what was happening in the Patagonia at that time, but I understood that it was absolutely necessary to put the science in the middle of the topics and works with the community.
Entonces ahí se forma un círculo. Entonces nos dedicamos, primero que nada, a hacer ciencia sobre las ballenas, que sacamos 71 papers en esa época.
So the first thing was to develop science around the whales, and we developed more than 71 papers concerning the whale situation.
Yo no entendía mucho, pero sabía que teníamos que hacer estas, ¿cómo se dice? Expediciones.
It was quite visionary, and we developed several expeditions
Y en estas expediciones se hacían muchos estudios.
with a lot of studies.
¿Qué es lo que hacíamos nosotros? Era agarrar eso, transformarlo en videos,
And together with those scientists, we used to develop a lot of audiovisual material
y no solamente eso, sino llevar este material a las escuelas.
in order to bring this material to schools and to community.
Y ahí empieza una red, en realidad, por lo menos en la zona, donde trabajamos con toda la comunidad, identificando también los cetáceos de la zona.
And this is how we started to work with the community, identifying the cetaceans of the zone and the locality.
Entonces ahí podemos decir, bueno, la filantropía aporta a la ciencia, en el fondo, para poder poner la urgencia en la comunidad donde está.
So this is a way that philanthropy has to bring urgency in the community and to help science.
Ahora, lo más destacable, diría yo, que independiente de eso, que es una forma de trabajar de nosotros, que trabajamos en todos los territorios, en este territorio en especial,
But beside that, together with everything I already explained,
nosotros nos dimos cuenta de que en Chile tiene, no sé, 6.000, ¿cuánto?
4.500.
4.500 metros de distancia,
So in a country like Chile with more than
océano,
4,500 kilometers of distance, with the mountains and the ocean, the Pacific.
y la pregunta fue, ¿por qué la gente no navega más en Chile si tenemos el océano?
The question was, why don't we have more navigators in Chile? What is happening?
Entonces, lo que hay dentro del océano,
It looks like Chilean doesn't know very well what is happening in our deep sea, let's say. So it was a question that she was wondering at that time.
sobre todo la navegación,
And in particular about navigation,
teniendo los fiordos más hermosos
considering that we have
en ese
one of the most beautiful fjords of the world,
entonces se estaba perdiendo también.
so we were losing the culture of the zone.
Por lo tanto, ahí vino un proyecto emblemático.
So this is where we decided to develop an emblematic project, and I want to talk about it.
Este proyecto reunió todas las amenazas
And maybe it was one of the most important project because it allowed us to put all the synergies and all the knowledge that we have developed as far. And we decided to develop a shift, a very sustainable shift, specifically developed for the Patagonia with solar panels, with a particular system in order to avoid a strong noise, with a particular painting not to avoid contamination. We really develop a 100% traceability in the shift. We knew that we were building something absolutely wonderful, but we never ever imagined that we would earn the Monaco, a huge prize because of the technology of the shift on Monaco this year. So put first of all the problem and then understand that there is a philanthrope and a businesswoman that decided to invest and risk on a shift, on a sustainable shift that could be able to recover the culture of the territory with the best technologies. Yeah, she get emotional. Yeah, obviously it took a long time. We worked with a lot of calculation, but we were not that sure if it would work or not. It was a kind of prototype. And the most important thing is that this boat have a certification that certify the emission of the lowest emissions in the world and the sustainability. So obviously we are proud of that. And this is what I want to put on the table. It is possible. We do this to change the navigation in our country. And at the same time, it allows us to develop other projects as Blue Boat Initiative, a scientific project in order to prevent the collision between wheels and shift. We throw a buoy, we hear the song of the whales, and we prevent the shift on presence of whales in order to avoid collision. It was innovation, it was technology, and we developed a lot of science and work around that. From the very beginning, I think from 12 years ago. We have 12 years the work around there. Yeah, today the boy is not there anymore. It was. But this is a risk. For us, the project was a success because of the work behind in terms of communication, in terms of community. So when the accident happened with the buoy, we understand that we already achieved a lot of goals. The technology already exists. We developed this technology in Chile. And this is something great. This is what I wanted to say. I tried to summarize everything, and thank you very much. And I really wish to invite the industry, the businessmen. We need to invest in innovation. We need to innovate. We need to take risk. We cannot believe that we are always win. Even if we lose, actually we are not losing. Sometimes people believe that this buoy was lost, and no, actually the work is here. We are here, we are still working because of that. And thank you very much. And all the team behind, because otherwise it wouldn't be possible, and I couldn't do this alone. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francesca, on your passionate speech, and I think you do so great work in Chile that can be applied everywhere. So I think this is a project that other philanthropists can take on board and sponsor for other regions as well. Thank you so much. And then I want to go on to Professor Cordes. You were with us in Monaco. What did you take from the Monaco, and what, with your work as a former Minister of Environment, how do you see that we can move the agenda and achieve the synergies between the different conventions and also safeguard the oceans at the same time? The word is yours.
Well, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here again, Francesca. Thank you for the invitation. Gracias por la invitación. Y es siempre un placer de oírte, tu fuerza y tu inspiración. Gracias. It's always a pleasure to hear Francisca, and the inspiration and strength and all this energy, positive energy that really brings to a room and to our work. I was in Monaco, and it was really good. I was in this ocean governance panel. And one of the things that I retained, and I think it's important because I do have, coming from Portugal, I do have the European perspective. And when we think about decarbonization, for example, shipping in this case, and when we think about biodiversity and climate goals, we always feel that we have settled, and I'm a lawyer by training, and not only at Nova School of Law, but also a practitioner lawyer. I am head of the Environment and Climate Change Practice Area at VDA, which is a Portuguese-based law firm. But seeing all the big picture, what I feel is that we have a lot of legislation, but we need the whole world to be aligned. So we have the Paris Agreement, and in Europe we have the European Climate Law, which makes it absolutely mandatory with rules, with targets through the different areas of economic activity, namely to shipping. We have in the shipping, we have the carbon pricing for shipping in Europe. We've just brought shipping inside the ETS scheme. It was not in the beginning, it is right now. The cut of emissions at the same time with precise targets. At the same time, the need to recover the ecosystems with our recently approved restoration law in Europe. And what we feel is we need pretty much all of these efforts and strength together to bring this ambition to the global level through IMO, through the different agencies of the United Nations. And this, we were talking a little bit before, how are the mandates of the different conventions. They take the mandates from the countries all over the world. So it is the word of the countries that do make a change if like-minded countries come together and ask for a raise of ambition. If Panama or Chile or Portugal, other United States are together and say, we need more, we need you to speak more to each other, because otherwise the secretaries do not have the mandate, do not have the efforts to deliver into that direction. So what I see, and when I see, I take a broader lenses, because I bring also the ESG approach, which tells us that all the companies, and this is cross-cutting, and again the shipping companies as well, need to report, need to disclose information on what they're doing, what is their carbon footprint, the scope 1, 2, and 3, how are they doing, and to deliver that information in a very transparent, precise, and credible way in an annual basis. And this will make a change, because this will allow comparison. This will allow competitors to look at who is doing what. this allows consumers, and consumers are empowered and will be much more empowered in the coming years because all the digital tools that will help us, and again, regulations will help us to look at a product and see how this product traveled to my place, if coming from the other side of the world, for example. How was this voyage? How was it shipped? What was the fuel that was used? What was the carbon footprint of this precise product that I'm buying? And I can decide if I'm going to buy this or that, and I will be empowered. So what I see is really a very relevant net of legislation that is making sense. And I've been, this is my third day here at Climate Week in New York, and just having a nice chat this morning about how this European legislation influences or not the rest of the world. And the fact is that it influences. And the fact is that the United States, for example, are looking at this legislation. The United States are very diverse, but for example, California law is inspired by the European legislation on disclosures of sustainability issues. This means that with more information and with the relevant tools, but with countries taking the word and pushing the agenda, and of course countries push the agenda if their public opinions are aligned with that and also ask for that. So science again, and all the efforts of IPCC and all the information that we bring to public opinion is extremely relevant, because at the end the governments do represent their people, and they will be the voice of what they feel that is important for those countries again. But I live in New York, back to Portugal, quite optimistic and enthusiastic, because I do see things moving. I do see things moving, and I feel that we have a lot of work to do. We had some good, very practical, we might say, these are details, are not details. This idea of lowering the speed, it can make a lot of difference. This idea of having the biological corridors do make a lot of this difference. That, well, must be combined with maritime spatial planning, with BBNG and so on. But I do see a lot of room, namely when we think about the coming biodiversity COP and how to finance all these options. Look at the market options, look at biodiversity credits, look at nature credits, carbon credits, and bring all that together, and we might be surprised. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Professor, it was timely that you were mentioning the CBD, because we have Tristan Terrell here from the CBD, and I think he will give a little word on how the global biodiversity framework, how that actually also lines up with the challenges we have on shipping, and also your, well, the upcoming COP16, which is in next month, coming very soon. You know, how you see the challenges there and how you think that we can do. And before that, I think we need to say goodbye to Dr. Vidar. Thank you so much for attending the event. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, she just want to move up. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So, Tristan, the word is yours.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. And while musical chairs are happening here around me, well, first off, thank you very much for the invitation to speak today and to listen to the esteemed panel that we have here, all the different perspectives, plus also a phenomenal venue for this discussion. And just after hearing that introductory welcome about the eras of exploration that this institution has seen, it just made me realize that the point where we are now in terms of how we envisage ourselves relative to the world around us, the planet and the impacts that we're having, and how we are finally coming to a point where we're realizing those impacts, what we need to be doing, because frankly we are changing the world around us, and the need to put us to re-envisage the way we see the world around us and how we go about that. So it's interesting to hear about the Maersk example about what they're doing in terms of moving towards alternative fuels, etc. And it just made me think about, well, what's the difference between focusing on climate compared to focusing on biodiversity? And so a lot of the discussion around climate, a lot of the solutions that are related to climate are largely coming down to economic reasons. Thinking about future-proofing, profitability, etc., the cost of fossil fuels going up, carbon taxing, and other approaches that are encouraging some of this change, as well as consumers wanting to see that change from the companies that they are dealing with. Biodiversity, we don't quite have such a linear engagement, I think, with some of these processes, and so maybe some of those what might well be. Yes, some of them are legislative in terms of requiring companies to change the way they act, they behave, they produce, etc. But there's also there's a certain sort of carrot side of things as well, by consumers saying that no, this is what we want to see and how we want to spend our money. With biodiversity, there is a lot of dependence on governments, in particular, to provide that legislative obligation when it comes to thinking about biodiversity, because of that somewhat disconnect between a number of sectors and the biodiversity impacts. So for instance, shipping within the Global Biodiversity Framework, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which was adopted just a couple of years ago, doesn't specifically mention shipping. The only industries that are specifically mentioned are forestry, fishing, agriculture. And then there are others about links to health, and a couple of other things. Pollution, for instance, is very broad, except it does specifically mention plastics. That might be in the context because of the current or the planned at that point negotiations on the plastics treaty. But it's very contextualized, and it doesn't necessarily think about the broader impacts. So when it comes to thinking about the shipping industry and the engagement with the Global Biodiversity Framework, it's somewhat indirect. Whereas, okay, I don't know if this shipping industry is specifically mentioned in the Paris Agreement, for instance, but in terms of, like I said, I think there's a slightly more direct link when it comes to climate. So looking at the GBF, you have various targets which are of relevance in particular to this discussion. So the ones that are looking at spatial planning and thinking about, well, what are those shipping routes that are being part of general looking at national, in particular national territories, both land, terrestrial and marine. Thinking about that spatial planning, what are we using certain areas for? Where are we putting our protected areas, whether they're marine or land-based protected areas? Then thinking about when it comes to those economic activities, where are they being placed, and what are some of those impacts that are happening there? There are a number of other targets. The highlight one, I suppose, is 30 by 30, which you might have heard. There are actually 3 30 by 30 targets within the framework, but the most famous one as such is relating to protected areas and this expectation of 30% to be designated a protected or other effective area-based conservation method by 2030, including in the marine area, which historically has been further behind terrestrial areas. But they're also relating to restoration, the expectation of restoring 30% of degraded lands and marine areas. And also funding, $30 billion being flowing by 2030 in overseas development assistance. And so there are a number of 30 by 30, but the protected areas one is certainly the most high profile. There are others relating to pollution. And the link there, of course, is with ballast water and other wastewater, as well as just general discharge from boats, from ships. Looking at the impact on invasive alien species, or the introduction of invasive alien species. Those pollution things, and thank you for raising noise pollution, which is a very important one from a biodiversity perspective. It isn't mentioned in the GBF. And so I think the point that I'm trying to get to is that there is need for effective engagement with the sector, and that interpretation that's required, that translation as such, into what is specifically important within that sector. A couple of the targets that are particularly key is about decision making at all levels, is a very important one, and also the engagement with indigenous peoples, local communities, and those who live in areas that would otherwise be affected by some of these activities. So thinking about fisher folk who live in those areas that have shipping coming by, and what is the impact that has on their areas, thinking that they themselves are working on a very much more subsistence level, and of course can't adapt as easily if something happens. And yes, the wildfires and that ship that hit the bridge in, was it Baltimore? You know, those hopefully relatively short-term impacts do require some sort of adaptation to deal with it, but of course not everyone can adapt so easily. So a couple of the principles that cut across the whole of the GBF is about a whole of society and a whole of government approach. And that we need to see this as not just being something for the Ministry of Environment, and even in particular the biodiversity office within the Ministry of Environment, but actually think about how this translates across to everyone. So from the CBD perspective, we're looking at the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, the NBSAPs, that are the policy instruments under the Convention. How are they being linked to the nationally determined contributions and national adaptation plans, certainly when related to climate change, but also sustainable development plans, sectoral development plans, and where's the link within those? I know in Scandinavia, Norway, for the previous NBSAP, tried to do an NBSAP specific for each sector within their government, which was an interesting approach. I'm not sure it actually particularly succeeded, but largely because it was well-intentioned, but there's that consultation that has to happen and engagement that has to happen right the way through the process, up to setting the NBSAP, defining what are the strategies and the action plans, but then also carrying through into the implementation. And we have a very short period of time. 2030 is the deadline for the GBF, as it is for the SDGs, and that's literally around the corner, frankly, scarily. But so there needs to be fast and effective implementation straight away. And ultimately, it's going to come down to money. And one, in terms of those incentives, what is encouraging those companies and the industry as a whole to make the changes required, supporting governments to actually be able to back up those legislative and other approaches that they're taking in terms of defining protected areas, carrying out the enforcement that is needed. But then there's also, just more broadly than that, thinking about, well, what are the underlying drivers towards both biodiversity loss and climate change and pollution and everything else? And it comes down to things like incentives. And where are those incentives going behind the scenes, and thinking about the trillions of dollars that is going to activities that are ultimately undermining the very planet that we're living on, that we survive because of. And we've heard so many times of people saying, well, I'm doing this to protect the planet. And people are pushing back, saying the planet will live a lot longer than we will. It's more about our own resilience. And it's also about thinking about, well, what are the driving forces behind the scenes, not just about designated protected areas or thinking about particularly sensitive sea areas, for instance, and how do they overlap with EPSAs. Those are all very important and need to be, those are important discussions that need to happen as part of those upfront approaches, but then also thinking about those underlying drivers. One of the other targets that I did want to mention was about sustainable consumption. Now, it shouldn't just be on the consumers to change their behavior, it's on the producers as well. But it's things like that. How are we as a society engaging with the planet around us, and how do we see ourselves within that? And I wish we could bring everyone into this space so that they'd have the time to reflect on how they themselves as individuals, as societies, and as the global population as a whole, how are we actually seeing our long-term future, and what are we doing about it? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Christian. And I mean, you did mention indigenous peoples and local communities, how important they are in conserving and protecting the environment. And this is our next session. It's about indigenous people, local communities, and cultural heritage. So I want to say thank you so much. We could have talked for hours on this, but unfortunately our time is up. Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you for coming.